Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another edition of Roll Call, an opportunity for us to meet, have a conversation with those individuals who inspired us, who motivated us, and who shaped us as individuals during our stint in IIM Kozhikode. This is season 1, episode 7. I would like to ask you to like and subscribe to this particular channel for more exciting events of this kind in future. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. To put it in very simple terms, this is a very charismatic and charming individual. Now, I first noticed him because of a slightly unusual name. However, I was completely blown off by his talk that he gave as the PGP chair when I attended the PGP inauguration in 2011 when I was an FPM student in IMK. Now, this is an individual who has supported many of us. He is an agony aunt of sorts. It's my pride and privilege to welcome to our midst our guest for today, Professor Anandakuttan Unnithan, who is a professor of marketing, who is also the Dean of Academic Affairs and Development in IIM Kozhikode. Welcome, sir.
I'm trying not to blush.
Okay, how are you doing? How are you doing in these really difficult times?
Well, it's a struggle, but then somehow we are managing. There is a lot of uncertainty.
Okay, so for your sake and for the ones who are listening, this is an event basically which tries to mix a lot of fun with some serious talk. Serious meaning COVID-19. We'll come to it. It's inevitable. But we'll have our conversation surrounding your life in general, you as an individual, your IIM stories, which many of us are really keen to know. You as a dean, you as a teacher, for very selfish reason as a fellow academic. So in between, we'll also have some questions from our audience who can type in their questions into the chat, and we'll share that with you as well. So shall we begin?
Why not? Why not?
Okay, so let's start with the most fundamental question. Can you please share with us your track towards IIM Kozhikode, meaning your academic routes that you followed, the reason why you chose to become an academic. In short, a brief history of your life as an academic.
Like most of those students in IIM Kozhikode, I did my engineering. Why did I do my engineering? There is no particular reason that everyone else after their +2 wrote engineering entrance. I also wrote engineering entrance, did my engineering. I realized that, well, I don't like engineering. Did my MBA. So I was in the industry for a few years. But I found it's a little routine and repetitive, especially at the early stages of your career. So there is nothing much to do. I was in sales career. It was extremely difficult for the first 1 year. But then once the relationships are there, then it is more of routine. I thought like there is nothing much I could do in terms of innovation, something new, thinking through issues. Maybe that was a time, we are talking about the early liberalization when a lot of commodities were controlled and the government used to have a say in permitting anything and everything in the country. That was a time when I started my career. Probably many of the current crop of MBAs may not experience that. It is as if it is in a completely different world altogether. So that's when I got an opportunity to teach part-time in one of the universities in Kerala. So I did not know anything about teaching. So I went there, I found almost all the people sitting in front of me were older than me. I must be 26 at that time. The youngest of my student must be 30, 32. So it was difficult, but then I would say they made me learn how to be a teacher. So that's how I made this initial forays into teaching. So 2 to 2.5 years, I was a part-time teacher. Then I got an opportunity to teach in a college full-time. So it was a risk. At that time, teaching you never used to be a well-paying job. So I took a risk, started teaching full-time, then did my PhD. I was in the university system for almost 10 years. And then again, the boredom started setting in. See, you kind of teach the same course again and again. So I wanted to have a challenge. So I took a break. I was principal of a startup college for a couple of years, setting up a college, starting the program, learning how to market the program. And that college was going on well for quite some time. And that's when I got an opportunity to be in IIM Kozhikode. Like many of us, IIMs were kind of dreams, unachievable dreams, right? So I never knew whether I'll get an opportunity or not. So I just attended the interview, and it's actually very fascinating. So I don't know, many of you may not be familiar with the process of selection of faculty in the IIM system. So we have something called a seminar. So the seminar is attended by the fellow academics. So you will have a few old people, maybe a few young PhD students. Hardly it will be exceeding 10 or 12. So I came here hoping to give a presentation on the methodology, statistical analysis, right? The contributions to the body of knowledge. So we use such words, right? The body of knowledge, the conclusion, validity, and such things. So I walked into the class armed with my presentation. I found that the class is full of students. And some were even standing. And most of them appeared to be like very young, to be, I would say, even PhD students. So what happened is that was a time when I believe PTP 10 students were in the campus. Just before their classes begin, we have this induction remedial module. So they were just walking along the campus. They found there is a seminar poster there, and they just walked in.
Okay.
So my seminar was like that. So sometimes I feel I got a chance to be in IIM Kozhikode because of them. Because it is as if you are teaching in an MBA classroom, and there were quite a lot of questions. And the faculty who walked in were also surprised. The first time in possibly in the IIM history, so many PTP students were attending a seminar. So that's my experience. So I joined IIM Kozhikode in 2006 as an assistant professor, then worked through the ranks. It took me, I would say, 12 years to be a professor. Now I think this is my 14th year, just about starting. So that's my story.
That's a very fascinating story. I would never expect to see that kind of a crowd in a faculty recruitment seminar, because every seminar that I ever attended in Kozhikode, we had maybe 15 people maximum. That's pretty much it. So
I have some 75 people.
Oh, wow. That's a full classroom. Okay. Now, taking a cue from this point.
PTP students from that particular seminar, I believe her name was Jeanette Marsh.
Okay.
Because she asked me a question there.
Okay. I hope she's attending this and she gets happy with the information that you still remember her. So about this point of keeping yourself motivated. See, as a teacher, you tend to teach the same thing every year. So how is any batch different from any other? So how do you find this motivation to go to a class and do something different after maybe teaching for 5 or 6 years?
Yes, you have to repeat the same job maybe 3 times, 4 times, 6 times. It gets it gets pretty boring. Maybe the same topic you have to repeat again and again, but the students are different. And there is something about an unexplainable energy which the students bring into the class, especially in the first year. So there is something about there is a vibrance which is there in the class. So what is important is, unless I feel enthused, I don't think I'll be able to enthuse my students. And the biggest challenge in a teacher's role is to remain enthusiastic, not for a few years, let's say for 25 years. No, I'm almost touching 25 years in this teaching career. So remain motivated. Well, you take a deep breath. This is a new batch. Let's go in. So if you are not able to do that, it's difficult.
So the kind of boredom that affected you when you were in the university system, why is it that IIM system is basically different? Why is it that you're not getting bored of it? Or are you bored of it?
IIMs are very entrepreneurial, not only for students, but for faculty also. We have the freedom to bring in new content, new ways of teaching. There's quite a lot of experimentation that is possible. And IIM students are not timid. And they bring in completely new, fresh perspectives. And we don't have what is called a curriculum which is rigid. I would say our curriculum, our content, our teaching, they are pretty much alive, which some universities may have a different system, but many of the universities, it becomes quite calcified. I'm talking about the Indian universities, some of the universities, not about the global universities.
Okay. So as a faculty member, you always have your teaching load. You have your research, which keeps you really interested and close to what is going on in the real world. And then on top of that, you have the admin responsibilities. Now, I know that admin roles are nothing new to you. You have been in very high profile admin roles. You have been the PGP chair. You have been the head of the Kochi unit of IAM. But I think to date, one of the most important role that you have had is as the dean. So how does that, how different is his life after you became the dean?
I'm not getting enough time to teach. That's something I miss.
Okay.
It's a big vacuum, and even when I teach, I'm not able to devote enough time to kind of get myself immersed into that teaching. So that's something I really miss. I don't think any academic would voluntarily choose an administrative job.
Okay.
Teaching is any day much more fascinating, much more exciting than an administrative job. There are trappings of, I would say, the success and the power that is there, but it's not really worthwhile.
Okay. So we managed to stay away from the COVID topic for 11 minutes, which I think is really amazing. So now let's step into the COVID world and the COVID related questions. So COVID is changing a lot of things for a lot of people. Very few people around the world are unaffected by it. And the incoming PGP cohort, they are going to be massively affected by it. And all of us know that a big chunk of your experience in IM is the actual experience of being here. It's being a part of some club. It's being part of the parties. So they are going to entirely miss out on that experience. So, do you think from the recruitment pattern, which I'm very sure you're familiar with, do you think candidates are intentionally deferring for a year to make sure that they get this experience? Are there any signs or reflections of that in the recruitment pattern as such?
So far, no. I think, quite contrary, the opposite is true. Many people might think this is the best time to do a 2 year MBA or a 1 year MBA. The recruitment scenario may be bad, and many of the students are choosing, and this time our acceptance was much better than the previous year.
I see.
But certainly, IIMs and MBAs they have something called an experiential part there, and I am a person who believes that 60% of the transformation that someone gets in a PhD or an MBA program, either that is intangible, experiential, and that is not through the structured teaching and learning that happen in a campus. And we are trying our best by trying breakout rooms and creating some other virtual experiences, and I'm not sure whether that is comparable. We'll have to cope, probably at the earliest. We'll need to
Okay.
bring that.
As faculty members, we are going to face many challenges, but from a student's perspective, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for a student in this COVID way of learning?
See, there are some people who are fiercely motivated, and I think they may not even need a professor. They can even learn from textbooks. They can learn from Coursera, but then majority of us are not like that. We need a system. We need processes. We need people around us, and we need the processes to take us through the 2 year program. So I think listening to online classes, let's say for 3 hours, 4 hours, paying attention, focus, which is going to be a challenge. Like many teachers are realizing it. Like if you look at some of the edX or the Coursera courses, they typically one session or one lecture is 5 minutes to 10 minutes,
I see.
or they are very 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 small modules. So that is precisely because we realize that it's difficult to retain the interest of that student for that extended period of time. So, as a faculty, it's a big challenge. How do we keep the interest of the student? Even in a classroom, it's difficult, but online, it is all the more difficult. Um, we are all exploring ways and means of doing that, right?
Yes.
But this is something like
Even in a
uh,
regular classroom, we have experience of people staring at their crotches for too long and smiling, but obviously nobody is that fascinated by their crotches. It's their mobile phones. So I remember you telling me once that a large part of teaching is actually performing. You have to be a performer to be a good teacher. But how do you perform when you don't even get to see them? When it's online, this performing aspect becomes quite a bit of a challenge. So as I believe you have already done a few online sessions yourself. So what was your experience, and how well do you think the students were interacting and participating?
um, it's very different. Like if you are taking students online and if you allow them to participate in a group discussion, because of the limitations of technology that we have, we lose quite a lot of time. So what happens is, over a period of time, we settle into a chat mode of participation. Over a period of time, we will also maybe look at small group discussions. We try to make a few called calls. So that's what we are attempting to do. But not every faculty is equally proficient in that or equally comfortable in that. If we must have seen in classrooms, like some professors are very good at discussion oriented teaching, some professors are very uncomfortable in discussion oriented teaching. So if someone is uncomfortable in discussion oriented teaching in classrooms, it's very difficult to translate that into online space. But if someone is naturally a discussion oriented professor, then possibly, well, some things can be done. We can have breakout teams and we can do call calling, but it takes a lot of emotional effort and it requires quite a lot of preparation to manage a 1 hour 15-minute class, because that spontaneity that you have in classrooms, it doesn't happen in an online space.
Personally, I find online teaching to be really hard too, because you really don't get an opportunity to charm people. And obviously, to build that connection, it's really important, at least in the first couple of sessions. So that is quite a bit of a challenge everywhere, irrespective of where you are.
Yes.
So, as a marketing professor, how do you think this COVID situation is going to affect the field as such, and for those who are aspiring to find a career in the marketing field as such?
See, some sectors of the economy itself is shut down. There is no hospitality industry to speak of. There is no travel and tourism industry to speak of. So some sectors of the industry itself is shut down. What we need is not funding or subsidy or loans. What we need is, there has to be some way of ensuring that, well, the supply chain continues to operate without any hindrance. That is one concern which we have. To some extent, there are experiments that are happening. Well, Amazon is trying to do a good job. So I think they are better off, possibly, even though in the first couple of months there has been some trouble. So I think these are the situations where businesses will experiment. Businesses will try to bring in something that they have never experimented. Like recently in Calicut, there is a boutique called a Mantra. So I overheard them talking to my family. So they were telling that we will put you on a video call and we will show how this clothes will look on a mannequin. And if you require, we will send it to you. So they are trying to convert the high intensity, high experience selling which happens in a boutique to an online space. So quite a lot of innovations are certainly happening there. So I am pretty confident that even though there are restrictions, marketing will find a way. Maybe it might take quite a lot of trial and error, but that trial and error will certainly happen.
Definitely. On a very positive note, let's take a step away from the COVID situation and move on to something a little lighter. So you had a 1-year stint, I believe, in Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand. So how did that opportunity come about?
Well, that was extremely interesting. AIT is having students from 45 different nations of the world.
Oh, that's really international.
It's really international. But my elective was subscribed by, I would say, around 10 people.
Okay.
And they were from Philippines, from Nepal, from Thailand. And one interesting thing is, many of them were finding it extremely difficult to follow me. They are all very nice people. They will nod their head very wisely. But then soon I realized that I will have to go extremely slow. I don't know about. I think you also have the same characteristics.
Yes,
right?
I have to slow down a lot. Yes.
So I really had to slow down.
Okay.
And one learning which I had is, I realized that intelligence or learning is not a function of the way we speak. Okay. It's not even a function of the language that you have. They do very well. But then if you evaluate them on the same metric that we evaluate, I would say, our IIM students, maybe we will reach a completely different conclusion. So that multicultural experience was very exciting.
Did you want to continue there, or were you actually motivated to come back? Did you miss anything in IIM at all when you were there?
I missed IIM Kozhikode. There is something like There is something about the spontaneity in the classroom.
Okay. I think that is basically a function of the communication also. Intelligence probably is not a function of communication, but participation and interaction definitely is. And with IAM, something that everybody notices is that you ask one question, 20 hands would go up. So that really does make the class a little more exciting.
We are very competitive. We
Yeah,
believe that
yes.
being quick-witted is something which is very important. I don't know, students will tolerate faculty who might have to think for a few minutes or say, let me go and refer and come back. So we expect the faculty to be very quick-witted, right? So that is something which, if you enjoy that interactions with the students, if you enjoy the retorts that you can make, well, there is nothing else. I'm not sure whether everybody will enjoy that or not.
It's a bit of a challenge, to be honest. It's not an easy classroom. IAM code classrooms are never easy classrooms to manage. There are
It
always
is good.
challenges. Yes,
See,
it's not.
I don't know whether students have that faculty perspective. You are in a well and you're looking up at 70 students, and by the third row, the student will be above your head and they will all be looking down at you. And suppose if you're coming from outside the IIM system, in the back of your mind, always you have a doubt, are they, what is going through their mind? Do they really accept you? Or is there an element of ragging? There is a story that one student from, I would say, PGP 14 or 13, I don't remember, PGP 14, they said they used to have an exercise in the class. Like they take a piece of paper and just write a word in it. And then that piece of paper is passed down. Whoever who gets that paper has to ask a question with that word in it. So mostly that questions will be, something which will be a challenge for any teacher because it's
Right.
a random question.
It's a random question.
I
Yes.
don't know whether they have experimented that with me, but I have experienced quite a lot of random questions.
I see.
There has been another very interesting student. I don't want to name him. Whenever I look at him, he used to be half asleep or maybe 90% asleep.
Okay.
Suddenly he just wake up and then ask you a question. And that question will be very, very challenging to answer. And by the time you start answering that question, he will go back to sleep. I
Okay.
don't want.
That's really interesting. So, in a classroom, when have you ever felt like have you ever felt hostility in a classroom where you feel negative vibes from the students, and if it does happen, how do you turn things around?
Very rarely I have felt negative vibes in the class. Sometimes the class goes silent, especially when you teach a course like consumer behavior, where you'll have to touch upon issues which are controversial. In academic interest, you might have to bring in certain politically charged examples.
Yes.
Like it's very difficult to discuss something like gender. It's
Hmm.
very difficult to gender such cases. So sometimes in certain sections they may also come up with their own political convictions, and sometimes I experience that the class goes very silent. So there is an eerie silence that happens in the class.
I see.
So it has happened rarely, but certainly it happens. And bringing back
Okay.
that is one way. He said you will have to stop the discussion there and take up something else. It's very difficult to confront it. That's one. Secondly, sometimes very very rarely that you lose your temper, and that also kind of leads to a situation where the class may not be hostile, but the class becomes indifferent. But it has rarely happened to me. But it is outside the class, you have to take a deep breath and you have to realize that for the next 1 hour, 15 minutes, this is a different world out there. And you have to maintain that equanimity. This is not the person that, this is a completely a different persona that you are being there. So the professor is not a person, the professor is a role that you play in the classroom.
I'll always remember that. So I'd like to let you know that we are also opening the question for the audience. So please type in your questions if you have any. So we would still continue, but as and when we get questions, we will raise them to Professor. So sir, now let's talk a little about your research. So congratulations for your publications in the very esteemed Journal of Business Research. I went through that paper. It's basically about Masstige marketing. So could you briefly explain what Masstige marketing is for people who are not familiar with the concept?
So Masstige is actually a new word that you can coin by bringing the mass and the prestige. So there are many brands like Garnier or L'Oreal, which in terms of pricing, in terms of affordability or availability, may not be perceived as luxury, may not be perceived as prestigious. But for certain sections of the population, well, they represent a certain quality and they have certain imagery which connotes an impression of being prestigious, being luxury. So that is essentially the idea of Masstige. So in the pyramid of various brands that are operating in, they are mid-level brands. They are able to provide prestige. At the same time, they have massive volumes. That's a concept of Masstige.
So when I was trying to understand this paper, one concern that something that hit me was that when I looked at mass plus prestige, I felt that it was an oxymoron, because something is prestigious or something is a premium product for some sections of the society because there is some amount of it being rare. Some for some reason it's because it's not, it's exclusive for some group of people. That's what it makes it a prestigious item, because if I have something that everybody has, I don't really attach a prestige to it. So how does establishing that among masses become a good option for any brand at all, or why is Masstige a possible option at all for some brands?
Harley Davidson is a very prestigious brand. It's a luxury brand. It's unaffordable to a large number of people. The mere ownership of that put you into another category. But if you're looking at Royal Enfield is affordable. They are able to cater to the mass. But at the same time, by virtue of the imagery, they perceive there is an exclusivity. That exclusivity has not come down because they are able to sell a large number of units. So how is it possible is by cultivating a brand perception, a brand imagery or a brand personality that connects with the psychography rather than just on price.
Okay.
So there is a psychographic alignment between what the brand stands for and what the consumers are. Only in such cases you can have Masstige. But if you are just taking a premium brand and then making it affordable and selling a large number of units, so whatever that made us create that prestige, it will get diluted. If you want to prevent that, that has to exist as a strong brand with a certain iconography, certain imagery, certain associations, which may not happen for all the brands.
Okay. So establishing something unique about a brand is really important before you can actually. But even when it becomes a mass product, it still is exclusive to a certain strata of the society, I believe. It's still not to everybody.
Yes. But then beyond exclusivity, if exclusivity is only your claim to fame, and exclusivity is by making it unaffordable, then it becomes a very difficult proposition. But what I'm saying is a lot of brands, say for example, the brand like Woodland. Well, the Woodland is not bought for functionality. The Woodland is bought for imagery. I don't know how many people would ever buy a Nike or a Reebok or an Adidas because they are serious athletes. Most of us are buying this for the imagery. There is a sense of an alignment between what the brand stands for and what we are. I don't know whether people who buy a Bose is the audiophiles. For audiophiles, they have their own units also. It is about a sense of identifying with what Bose stands for. It may be a reality, it may just be a perception. So, what I'm talking about is a sense of alignment, a psychological alignment rather than seeking status. So, prestige is about seeking status. Masstige is about a connect or an alignment.
Very interesting. So, what else is in your research pipeline? I do understand that you are really busy with everything that's going on, but is there any particular research idea that you're keen to explore, or you are in the process of exploring it right now?
Sometime back, I started pursuing some qualitative research, especially grounded theory. As of now, what we are looking at is, I have a research student now, so she is doing her PhD. So what is now being explored is what happens to men and women in middle ages and what happens to the transition they have when they reconcile with this idea of age, which is not chronological, which is more of their psychological notion of how old they are. So as of now, we are exploring the notion of middle age among men and women. So how do they address, how do they cope, how do they reconcile, and uh, how do they grow into that age? That's essentially what we are looking at. Still, it is very, very early stages. These are difficult aspects of research. So people may not always open up. So getting people to open up and then trying to build a theory. That's now what's now I'm spending some time on. But then it needs more time. It's not research. Unfortunately, is not something where you can do research in for half an hour every day. So that's not the way. You need chunks of time. The chunks of time is what is missing. Like even you might also be doing that, right? Half the year you teach, and the remaining half you will spend on your research.
Yes.
The problem with administration is administration every day, every hour, something or the other will happen. So that chunks of time is not always easy to have.
Exactly. I have known you as a quantitative researcher. In fact, when I was doing my PhD, I spent hours talking about methods and everything to you. But you taught me qualitative research. So there is this balance. So do you have any preference for a particular which one keeps you engaged? Which one keeps you more curious and interested?
Like many of us, I also believed while in school that a measure of intelligence, a measure of accomplishment is the mathematical mastery that you have. So if you get, let's say, 100% in history, nobody would consider you to be, a genius, right? But 100% in mathematics is very, very sought after. I think this is not something which, the question is not what I'm good at doing. The question is not what I want to do. This is more of a social conditioning. But as you grow older, you realize that everything cannot be captured in numbers. And there is a process of reductionism. There is a process of loss of whatever that original meaning that is there. So life is much more nuanced. So that is probably what attracted me to qualitative research. See, people are much more nuanced, right?
Yes. They cannot be put down in numbers every time. Yes.
But that is not what we really believe in the business school, isn't it? We believe that not only in the business school, in economy also, we believe that there is a dashboard and there are quite a lot of numbers, and I can analyze these numbers and I can take a decision, and the economy is transformed. And we expect that finance minister is someone with a magic wand. By the sheer intelligence and the number crunching ability, they know some rocket science. But we know that economy is not like that. Economy is much more complex than that. We also know that the managerial decision making is also not what you do on a dashboard. What you do by getting your hands dirty, right? By getting into ambiguous territories. Well, that's what I believe that that's the way that life is about. There are quite a lot of gray areas.
So now you are more of a qualitative researcher or you are philosophically more qualitative oriented than quantitative, I assume.
I am not sure because you have to make up the pretenses, you have to keep up the appearances, right? So quant is something you cannot give up. This is the bread and butter. This is a professional requirement. So and quant is something if you stay out of it, it's very very easy to forget it. It's very very easy to lose touch with it. So that is something of a challenge. How to manage, how to balance both.
Okay. So coming to research students, for those who are listening, also this is something that they might be interested in. Who should do a PhD? Who is the ideal PhD candidate?
Someone who enjoys a PhD. The best days in my life.
That's a very difficult thing to do. Enjoying a PhD.
The best day in my life was when I was doing my PhD. I was broke. I was married, and I had a child, and I did not know when I'll be able to submit. I really cursed everybody in my doctoral committee. I picked up fights with them, and I even avoided my doctoral committee members for months altogether. But now, when I look back, possibly that's the best day in my life. I believe that as a researcher, our primary identity is that of a scientist. I don't know how many management researchers ever look at themselves as a scientist. Are we a scientist? What motivates us? It's to find something new, isn't it? The quest for knowledge.
Yes.
If you enjoy it, PhD is one of the most wonderful experiences. If you enjoy that, teaching is one of the most wonderful experiences. But then you also get quite a lot of people who are motivated by the return on investment, the salary they get, the stipend they get, right? The security they get. A lot of people are in teaching for the wrong reasons.
Probably, yes. So here's another story that probably would make you blush again. I have this experience where I was doing my PhD, FPM or the PhD, and I was near our library in IIM, and a group of people who were trying to find their way, and I helped them. And I directed them, and then I was walking with them, and one of them told me that they were faculty members who were there to do a faculty development program with you, and one of them came there only because they wanted to attend your FDPs more than once. So there were people who were coming back to IIM Kozhikode only to attend your sessions more than once. How does this happen? What is the magic? How do you get people to be so interested in you that they come back only to listen to you teaching them again?
See, in a class of PGP, let's say 60 students, does it mean that I'm able to connect with everyone? No. No, we have some exceptionally gifted professors who gets something like a 4.9 out of 5 feedback, and students really worship them. But then sometimes I see at least one student in that batch writing very nasty things about them. Right?
Okay.
One of the first lessons that you learn in teaching is you can't have everyone. You can't please everyone. Well, there are some people with whom there is a connect, right? So with some people there is a connect because the way you speak, the way they respond, maybe I say the kind of things they expect me to say or they expect to hear. But at the same time, I am sure that my approach or my style may not appeal to, there are many people. One way is to stay in the middle, but then that makes you an average teacher, right? So it's better to be an exceptional teacher for a few people than be an average teacher for everyone.
Yes, that's interesting. So we have a question from the audience now. It's from Amarpreet Singh.
Yes, where employees are now valuing specialization. Amarpreet, I have a couple of strong opinions on it. Like there are a lot of MBAs who take up very technical roles which would require a very specific expertise. But at the same time, there are managerial roles which would require getting your hands dirty, bringing in the revenue, being responsible for profit and loss. So there are such roles which are primarily the business leadership roles. So I think some of our MBA students get into business, get to be the leaders of business. They lead the business. But then at the same time, there are a lot of KPO jobs, right? The knowledge process outsourcing jobs. There's a lot of this analytical jobs. So I think MBA should try to meet the aspirations of variety of recruiters. Let's say a recruiter is taking somebody as an analyst. They don't want general management skills. They want spreadsheet skills. They want mathematical skills. That's what they are looking for. But then suppose if you want to be in a startup, suppose if you want to be in a business development manager, it is completely different skill sets that are required. So I think MBA started as an academic program to develop leaders for the businesses, the frontline leaders. MBA was never about a program that will train the so-called analysts. But over a period of time, MBA also accommodated such people. That's what I believe. A lot of students after their MBA may not be doing a job which is about the front line of business. So I think there is enough opportunity after doing an MBA to be a generalist, to lead businesses. You need a generalist. You can't run a business with only consultants and analysts. You need generalists. So that's what I think is there. Executive education programs, we have a little bit more flexibility because there are people who come with a significant experience and what they look at is something different. They don't want to move into another role. Possibly they want to move up into into a different role. So that we have a little bit more of flexibility. PGDM program, yes, it is being continuously done. Restructuring of PGDM program is continuously being done. But then this has become an institution. Postgraduate diploma in management or MBA has become an institution with a global curriculum and with some very clear expectations from it. And I don't know whether an institute would dare to tinker with it beyond a point. So that means a lot of what we do as far as a PGDM or an MBA is concerned, is marginal changes. Whether it is easy for us to do a revolutionary change, I'm not sure about it. It takes quite a lot of courage. And I'm not sure whether everybody would say, for example, I never liked teaching with Philip Kotler. I don't consider that to be a great book for teaching marketing management 1 in PGP classes. There are much better books. And one typical complaint about my students is I don't cover Kotler. I don't. But then still, why do we still prescribe Kotler? Because everybody expects Kotler to be prescribed. Every student wants to get a copy of the Kotler. So Kotler has become something like an artifact or something like an expectation from an MBA program. It's very, very difficult to move out of that expectation. You'll be doing something, sacrilegious.
The next question is from Biswa Prati.
Well, from fair and lovely to glow and handsome, right? The name alone is not enough. I believe that businesses are about a very genuine, legitimate academic activity. Sorry, a very legitimate economic activity. Businesses try playing politics and making their value judgments and playing to the gallery, I don't think there is any end to it. Some of you must be familiar with it. In Kerala, there is a business group called the Kitex, who is one of the leading businesses in a small panchayat near Kochi. So they realized that a lot of the people of that panchayat work for that particular business group. So they thought, since anyway we are the leading employer, why not we start a political party? They started a political party. They stood in elections and they won the elections, and the panchayat is now managed to buy that particular business group. That could be an extreme example, isn't it? So here is a question where businesses apply moral judgments, businesses apply political judgments. Businesses then persuade the society this is the right way or the wrong way of doing it. In my view, whether Twitter bringing in with a political censoring or fair and lovely trying to apply a political correct approach, it has to be discussed in much more depth. That's what I believe is my view is concerned. A name change reflects that they have taken a decision. They have taken a decision which reflects their political philosophy. I'm not sure whether businesses with immense economic potential, with a huge command over their resources, they have to tread that line very, very, very carefully. So there are a lot of people, men and women in the country, who might want to have a different skin color. There might be cultural reasons behind it. There might be sociological reasons behind it. But it's a fact that there are a lot of people who may want to have a different skin color, who may not be happy with their hair, who may not be happy with their posture or with their body. So businesses exist, marketing exists because there are such opportunities that are there. So I believe businesses should remain where, as a legitimate economic entity, they should not do harm to the society. Sometimes certain lines are being crossed. But at the same time, well, we should leave the activism to the activist. I don't know whether people might agree with my view or not. Why I am worried about is there is huge economic resources that businesses have. And they employ some of the sharpest minds in the world. And suppose if businesses try to use the amount of resources they have, the amount of intelligence that the people who are working in the businesses to shape the society to a different political direction, this is to be considered very, very, very seriously. So whether it is about renaming a brand or whether it is about any such political interventions, I would like to call Fair and Lovely to Glow and Lovely to be a political statement Unilever has made. And before making that political statement, as a community, we should be worried about it.
Right. The next question from the audience.
Well, do you expect some changes in the consumer behavior due to forced digital interactions during these times? Well, the changes the changes are happening as we speak, right? So certainly the content consumption is increasing. New behavioral patterns are there. Well, I would say that we are learning how to smile with our eyes rather than with our lips. So these are all changes that are happening, right? This is still very early stages.
Okay. So I think we don't have any more questions from the audience. So before we wind up, I have two more questions for you. The first one is I remember reading a Facebook post from you which said that every batch thinks that they are special and that everybody who came after them are boring in some way. But essentially, do you feel that any batch is different from anybody else? So because we tend to remember some groups of people for different reasons. Sometimes because we are teaching them for the first time because they are our first batch. Sometimes they are very notorious or very rebellious, or sometimes they are extremely bright. So are there batches in your experience which actually stand out for the right or the wrong reasons, or are they all the same for you? I think.
Some of the batches certainly stand out. My first batch in IIM Cold Code, which was PGP10, was a very, very exciting batch for me. I think primarily it's because they baptized me to IIM Cold Code. We had some very, very interesting people there. And it was exciting time for me. I was much younger, and there were students of that batch who were more closer to my age. So that's a special batch to me because they were my first batch in IIM Cold Code, and I taught them two courses: marketing research for all of them, and consumer behavior for some of them who opted for my LLT. So it was not easy. I wouldn't say there was a ragging there, but it was really challenging to measure up to their expectations because I am coming from a completely different system. Well, PGP 14 has been a batch that is very close to my heart. Well, that's because we did quite a lot of innovations with regard to our admission policy at that time. That is a batch which touched 30% women for the first time.
Yes.
But not that there were 30% women. I would say that batch again was a very interesting batch as far as I am concerned, in the sense that they were also rather challenging to teach. The classes were even exciting to term 5. Usually what happens is by the time people reach term 5, well, everybody's priorities will shift. And that batch was a batch which I really enjoyed. So these are the two batches. I don't think that this is because that batch had any unique individuals or any unique composition, but it is more of an attachment because I was involved in a different way with those two batches. As far as PGP 10 is concerned, that's my first batch. PGP 14 is concerned, that's a batch I brought in as an admission chair, and that's a batch I took over as a PGP chair. So that is something which is a turning point. See, it is ultimately about, as a teacher, there is something called an emotional contagion, right? You bring in your expectation, you bring in your biases into how you shape the interactions with a batch.
Yeah.
I think more than the characteristics of the batch, it could be that I approach these two batches with some trepidation, some anxiety, because they were, as far as I was concerned, something new.
Yes.
But that's what I could possibly
Okay.
consider.
So all of us have our bad days. You certainly would have bad days too, but I have never seen you without a smile. I've never seen a frown on you. You've always stayed positive and always smiling. So what is that personal mantra for you that keeps you smiling throughout the day, smiling when things are not always going right?
There are two aspects. One is that you need to look at some of the issues at least with an arm's length. People might make comments. There are some times where you feel hurt. Over a period of time, you need to develop that ability to keep things at arm's length, especially in your profession. There are situations where you really feel like crying inside because you get an unexpected, very very unexpected comment from someone whom you thought you had an excellent relationship. So that happens. But in over a period of time, you tend to learn how to put on a mask and keep issues at arm's length. That is one. Second one is teaching is something where you play a role. I don't know whether they are my students are interacting with that human being whom my children would see or whom my wife would see. They are interacting with a role. That role is what I chose to play in that particular class. It doesn't mean it is someone different. It is simply that it's a different role. And if I want the students to be engaged, if I want the students to remain motivated, if I want the students to pay attention, I need to bring in some energy, some enthusiasm. I need to feel a positive mood, and this mood is something that you have to bring into the class. You can't expect the class to give you that mood. Once in a while, you come across some exceptional days where the class is able to bring in a very positive mood. The reverse may also happen, but you can't expect the class to bring in that positive mood. You need to take that mood to the class. There is an emotional contagion that happens. It may not always work. You can try.
Okay. So thank you very much for spending this time with us. I'm really sure that everybody had a good time asking you questions, listening to you again after these many years. So is there anything else you would like to tell us before we conclude for today?
What made you choose teaching as a career?
Oh, question for me. Okay. People like you.
No, but that you joined the PhD program and then only we met, right?
Okay, so for me, again, I started off as an engineer just like you did, and I got bored of my job just as you did. But I realized that talking to a large group of people is something that always kept me happy. It was exciting. But then again, I have only started off. This is only my second year as a teacher. I might get bored of it eventually. But as of now, it turned out to be a right decision because I still do like talking to a large group of people.
What do you do to maintain your composure in class? I know that you are someone who gets upset.
I haven't been very successful in maintaining my composure in the class, not 100% yet. But because I think it's still my initial years and still being very cautious in the class, I think I'm sort of okay so far. I think I tell myself that I have to be, I am the teacher here and I have to be composed. I think we are done with questions for me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope everybody had a good time. Thank you, sir. Bye. Thank you, everyone.